After years of a shared history dating back to childhood, a man returns home after a long time abroad, carrying the weight of a decision that changed his life forever. As he navigates personal and family challenges, he must face inevitable reunions and unresolved emotions. What was meant to be a simple homecoming turns into a journey of self-discovery, confrontation, and redemption.
My future wife wanted an open relationship to cheat one time before marriage. I, 34, male, ghosted my fiancée, 33, female, after she asked for a temporary open relationship before our wedding. She wanted to cheat one last time, and when I said no, she went ahead and did it anyway. I've rewritten this a few times trying to shorten it, but our history goes way back since we were kids, so I'm looking for advice on what to do when I get home in 2 days. I'm changing all names, obviously. Apologies for the length of this monster. Jen and I had been friends since we were kids. Our parents were lifelong friends, so we grew up together and started dating in our teens. It was almost like it was expected by our families, who had more plans for us than we did. When I was going for my master's, I had to move to another city, and Jen stayed behind in our hometown to work on her nursing degree. After a year of long distance, we decided to remain friends and not let the pressure of our relationship control us. We both dated other people, but we always knew that this was temporary and that we would eventually end up back together. When I graduated, I stayed in the city where I got my master's and started working in my field. A while later, I transferred back to my hometown, and Jen, who was in a long-term relationship, seemed to have a nice guy, but I always got the feeling he was weary of our friendship. I respected that and stepped back, though Jen and I would still talk a few times a year. My boss and mentor, Paul, 44, male, was a great guy, and we became good friends. One day, he came to me with an opportunity in a foreign city. It wasn't a great position, but the money was decent and all expenses were covered. It would be based in Tokyo, and I'd travel around Asia for work. I thought it was a great chance to gain experience and build my career, so off I went. The first year was difficult, adjusting to the culture and social rules of Japan and other countries I visited for work. What surprised me was how available women were everywhere. I had many friends with benefits, but I made it clear that I wasn't interested in anything long-term since I was staying temporarily. I stayed there for 2 more years, and Paul visited often. We had some wild times in places like Angeles City in the Philippines, and then my contract was over. I came home and put a down payment on a house just outside the city. Jen and I reconnected after she had broken up with her boyfriend, and we started dating again. However, I had developed a sort of addiction to having various partners while in Asia, so I held off on getting physical with Jen. I wanted to control my desires before we got serious, though Jen knew I dated other people. My mom would sometimes joke about it, calling me a man whore, and it stung, but I knew it was true. Things started to fall apart when Jen and I slept together, and she noticed a difference in me. She said I was different, like I had gained a lot of experience, and she asked me about it. I didn't tell her the whole truth, just a version of it that made me seem less experienced. Unfortunately, I had planted the seed of insecurity in her mind, and that would create serious issues later. Our families were thrilled we were together, and after speaking to her parents, I proposed. Jen moved in, and everything seemed great, but there were some red flags. She asked if I was happy. Fast forward to December 2019, and the wedding was planned for June 2020. Christmas was great, but near New Year's, things took a turn. Jen and her cousin Tammy, 32, female, were looking through wedding stuff when Jen asked if we could talk. Tammy stayed in the living room, and Jen sat me down to explain something. She said she believed I wouldn't be satisfied with her sexually, and that eventually I would cheat on her. She didn't want our future to be ruined, so she proposed opening up the relationship so she could gain more experience and feel less insecure. She assured me I was the only man she had ever loved, and that none of her previous relationships had led to marriage. At first, I thought this was a joke, but when I realized she was serious, I was stunned. Jen said she would only be with random people, never someone we knew, and that it wouldn't be an emotional connection. I lost it. I yelled at Tammy, wondering if she put Jen up to this, and she just said she was there to support Jen. Jen then told me I could do the same if I wanted, and I said no. I told her I didn't want one-night stands, just one person. Jen asked, "Who?" I looked at Tammy, not in her eyes, and said, "I want to fuck Tammy." This took everyone by surprise, and Jen immediately said no. Tammy was family, and it was gross for me to suggest suggest it. We argued back and forth, and I told her if she went through with this, the relationship would be over. I stormed off to the guest room, and though I could hear them talking downstairs, I couldn't make out what they were saying. The conversation lasted for an hour, and I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day at work, I was a mess. Jen started a 2-week night shift, so we didn't have to be around each other for a while. She left me dinner every night with an "I love you" note, but I kept my answers short. On the Thursday of her second week, I saw an email notification for a hotel reservation at a place near my office. I was confused since she was supposed to be working. I started looking through dating profiles, trying to figure out if she was seeing someone. I told Paul, and he suggested we go out for lunch, and during that time, I realized I couldn't handle the stress. I needed to get out of the house, so I packed my things and went to work. Paul suggested we stake out the hotel to see if Jen checked in. We set up in the lounge bar, and after a while, we saw her at the front desk, not in uniform. I was furious, but I waited until she went up to her room, then called her from the front desk. I screamed at her, telling her I was done, that the wedding was off, and the relationship was over. I hung up and left. I didn't know what to do, so I called my dad, explained what happened, and left town for a while. For 2 days, I didn't answer any calls or messages. I emailed Jen saying I was leaving the city and that everything was off. I called my dad, who was crushed, but understood I needed time. 10 days later, I flew to Bali, disconnected from everything, and spent the month drinking to numb the pain. I felt rage, shame, and hate. I kept in touch with Paul, but ignored Jen's attempts to reach me. I stayed in Bali for a month and then returned to Tokyo, dealing with the global virus situation. In September, I received news that my dad had a heart attack and needed bypass surgery. Things didn't feel real, and I couldn't find a way back to a life that made sense. Not as serious as it was 40 years ago, but I still wanted to see him. Just in case, I know when I get home it's going to turn into a crap show, and I really didn't want that. I just wanted to see my folks and thank Paul for all he's done for me, even as selfish as I was. But I know I'm going to have to see her, and I have no idea how I'm going to feel or think. I'm so sorry for the length of this. Even still, I left a lot out. Any advice, tips, or insults would be appreciated. I'm flying out in 4 hours and will land in about 24 hours. Update. After landing, I went to see my dad. He's looking good and actually looking forward to surgery. Mama's doing well, but obviously I'm asking with concern. I spent almost the first 24 hours by his side, and I think we talked about everything under the sun, but nothing heavy. Didn't want to stress him. I told him I am here for him, but I am using this trip to reorganize my life, close some doors, and open some new ones. On day 2, Paul and I met up at a local spot close to the office. Paul was already driving the booze into him. We talked for a bit back and forth about my dad, work, and he asked me if I had any contact with Jen, to which I said no. He then informs me the old man, the boss, wants to see me, but considering my father, it can wait. I know I'm in deep, so I tell him we may as well get it over with. I have a list of things I need to accomplish this month, and I may as well start knocking things off of it. Meeting Jen is one of them. I entered the office for the first time in what seems like forever. Many faces were missing, a few new ones, and the usual suspects. A few people nodded at me and greeted me. We headed up to the old man's office, and I had never been there before. We walked in, and he motions for us to sit down. I had never spoken to the old man before. He does walk the floor from time to time, but people just part like Moses spreading the Red Sea. This is the conversation that followed. Old man: "Good morning, gentlemen. This is a closed meeting, and anything discussed is private. Blah, blah, blah." The old man just starts going off on a rant about responsibility and dedication. He does have some good points, I have to admit. He looks at Paul and asks why they should keep me around. Paul says he does great work, has saved accounts, and acquired many new ones. Plus, we can't find anyone to do the job for the 20 below market salary like we're paying him. What the f? Then Paul and the old man start maniacally laughing like that bar scene in the Goodfellas movie. The old man wipes away a tear and tells Paul that's why he's the best VP he has. I make a good salary, but come on, man, I feel quite slighted. The old man looks at me and leans in. "Listen, kid, I know you had some problems with your woman, so let me give you some advice." He says some guy's name, quoting him. I'm not sure I remember word for word, but this is the gist of it. God gives women eyebrows and she plucks them out and draws on new ones. God gives a woman a face and she paints on a new one over it. God gives her breasts and she buys a push-up water bra. God gives her form and still not satisfied, she buys slim-fitting clothes to change that form. If God himself cannot please her, then how can you? Brother, please don't kill yourself. That kind of blew my mind a bit, I must say. The old man looks at Paul. I can trust you to handle this properly. Your mother will kill me if I have to fire you. So now it kind of hits me. They are effing related. Paul and I walk out, and I look at him and say, 20, man, really? He puts his arm around me and says, don't worry about that. I got you covered. So now it kind of hits me. They are effing related. Paul and I walk out, and I look at him and say, 20, man, really? He puts his arm around me and says, don't worry about that. I got you covered. And he puts puts his arm around me and kisses me on the side of the head. You could have told me that beforehand, you dick. Nah, it was much funnier this way. I missed you, kid. Now let's go get fed up. It's 8:30 in the morning. Paul, who does that? I do. You still have a lot to learn about enjoying life. Doesn't surprise me with this guy, really. What should I expect from someone who got all liquored up before on sake and got into a fist fight with a monkey, got his ass kicked as well, at the hot springs in Japan? We did end up getting pissed up. We talked about work, what was going to happen, and talked about Jen. He advised me that I really should meet her and get closure. He said we both did stupid things, but we are good people. Once I get closure, then I'll be able to move forward in my future without an anchor of emotion holding me back. He said once that is resolved, then we can talk about my employment future, what I want to do, and where I want to go. That was checked off the list at least. I still have a job and Dad is looking good. There's still the matter of Jen, which has been consistently in my thoughts. I unblocked her on Facebook and scrolled through to prepare myself for what was to come. I sent her a PM and asked if we could meet for dinner sometime soon. We only exchanged pleasantries and are meeting for dinner in the next few days. That will be my next update. Jen and I agreed to meet at a restaurant a few hours after she got off work. Now, going into this, I was afraid of two things: that my anger would remain and I would act accordingly, or my love for her would remain and I would act accordingly. I was hoping to find a comfortable medium in the gray area. All my plans flew out the window the moment she walked through the door. She looked wonderful. She smiled and walked over, and my stomach was in my throat. I wasn't this nervous when we lost our virginity together. We shared a short, awkward hug, and I could smell my favorite perfume on her. Is she about to love bomb me or play some emotional tricks? Is she in another relationship and here to show me what I missed? No rings on her finger, even the one I gave her. We talked about my dad first, and she told me she always checked in on him when she was on shift and assured me his surgeon for the upcoming bypass was one of the best. We cooked around small talk, like her extreme workload during the pandemic and what I experienced during lockdown in Tokyo. I was seriously getting ready to crack. I can assure you I was calm and collected on the outside, but falling apart underneath. I told myself I needed this to consolidate these feelings in order to move on finally. It seemed we were dancing around the elephant in the room for a painful amount of time, and she finally looked at me and her face changed. The whole conversation after that is a blur, but I will recount it to the best of my ability. First, I want to tell you how sorry I am for what happened and for hurting you. Are you sorry you got caught, or actually sorry for how you hurt me? Of course, I'm sorry for what it did to you, what it did to our lives and our future. I threw it away because of my insecurity. So, did you plan it because of your insecurity, or did you secretly want to punish me for the people I was with when we weren't a couple? Maybe both, but let me say that any other man that was in my life before we were engaged, I never loved like I loved you. Her ex before me cheated on me because he always told me that he could never compete with the feelings I had for you. We broke up for that reason. I did not know this, and to be honest, I never felt bad he cheated. I never wanted you to know I was going to sleep with another man. I thought I could emotionally detach from it, and even if you found out, we could work through it like everything we ever experienced before. You thought very wrong. It was probably the most painful thing I've ever experienced. I didn't need you to be perfect or experienced. I just needed you to be mine. All of them, Jen, every single one, could never add up to what I felt with you. But now I'm thinking, was it a real feeling or the projection of the dream of us that our family wanted or the fantasy we expected? It started to get emotional, and Jen excused herself and went to the washroom to collect herself. We were in a good-sized restaurant and only a few tables were occupied. Paul tagged along for some support, as some of you mentioned, and strategically placed himself in the sealed-off lounge. I looked over to get some encouragement or a thumbs up, and he's having a rather animated conversation with two rather attractive ladies, laughing, hand gestures, the whole 9 yards. He finally looks over, gives me a questioning thumbs up, and I know that everything's okay. He smiled, then gave me the middle finger with a smirk and went back to his extracurricular activities. This effing guy, seriously, Jen comes back and we resume. Is there anything you want to ask about that night? It can't be undone. It doesn't matter. Nothing happened. I wasn't even sure if I could have done it when you called the room. It scared the crap out of me and I raced down to the lobby, but you were already gone. It doesn't matter now. I'm not here to rehash the past. I want us to work on moving forward. Can you forgive me? Of course I can forgive you, and I do forgive you. You're not a horrible person. You just made a horrible series of choices that put us here. It's not all your fault. I should have been more open to understanding your worries as well. I was going through a cycle of emotions from love to anger to regret. Part of me wanted to yell at her, and another part of me wanted to take her home and forget this ever happened. For the past few weeks, I've been watching these Reddit videos on YouTube, preparing myself for this conversation and seeing these men punishing themselves for what their significant others had done, much worse damage than the actual cheating. I was determined not to be that simp. I started looking at her, with the old man's words running through my mind, painted face, painted nails, and form-fitting dress. Do I even really know her? If this is her outward appearance, is her mind the same? Are all their minds the same? I hardened myself. What now? Is there anything in the future for us? I want you to remember when we were kids, walking home from the park, that vicious dog that approached us. I got in front of you on instinct to protect you, to save you. The owner called the dog and it took off. Just mere seconds, really, but when you are 9, that's pretty scary. All these years later, I stood in front of you, loving you and protecting you for whatever would come at us. But this time, when I stood in front of you, giving you everything I had, you stuck a knife in my back, just like the frog and the scorpion. This statement really hit her like a bolt, and she lowered her head and sobbed a bit. I wasn't finished. I needed to get it out. I'm sorry. She takes out the ring box and slides it across the table to me. I leave it there. I don't want this. I'm pissed off. You think I want to be sitting here with my heart jumping out of my throat and you crying? I want to be home playing with the baby we would have by now. I can't remember anything said in the next few minutes. She began sobbing and holding her hands to her face. I've said some shitty things in my life, but that one takes the cake. I apologized and said that went too far. It snapped me out of anger mode. The rest of the conversation calmed down, and after I'd blown off that steam, we actually had a normal talk just about life in the future because our parents are so close, and her mom and dad are like my number 2 family and vice versa. We talked about how we could coexist in this realm as friends. Reconciliation is not on the table. She got up to leave, and we hugged for a long time. I'm going to leave this here and finish the rest off tomorrow. It's been a long few days.